Alright guys, welcome back. Yesterday, many news outlets reported a rumour of a new Splinter Cell game being in development. I first saw this reported by VGC, but as you can imagine since then, this has been covered by all the major news outlets. As you'd expect, many people are excited with this news, even if it's just a rumour at this point, because it's been a long time coming. I can't tell you how many times I've seen a new Ubisoft game reveal and players instantly replying, asking when a new Splinter Cell game is coming. With the announcement of XDefiant a number of months ago, Ubisoft's take on a hero shooter, which included characters from many of their IPs, including Splinter Cell, I think most people had lost hope for this franchise. But looks like Ubisoft may finally be listening to its player base. An article from Games Radar says players have reportedly tested something that had an appearance of a new Splinter Cell prototype in a test session weeks before E3 2021. According to VGC, this new project has been put into production as a means of winning back fans frustrated by recent efforts to revive the franchise. They are of course talking about the mobile and VR games. The most recent update suggests the new game may have been in development for several months, again reported by Games Radar. And that's great news, right? Well, I'm terrified. If this rumour is true, and I suspect it is, I'm scared Ubisoft are going to ruin this franchise, and here's why. It's no secret that Ubisoft have received a lot of bad press over the last couple of years, not just internally with complaints being lodged from many of their staff, but externally too, with many of their IPs moving to the free-to-play model. And that just makes me sad because I've always been a big fan of Ubisoft as a studio. They've made some of my favourite games, The Division 1, The Division 2 as an example. And the move that they've made recently has really made me look at them in a different light. I spoke about XDefiant, a hero shooter that looks like a clone of Overwatch but using assets from the Ubisoft library, that received a pretty scathing response when it was revealed. More recently, Ubisoft announced Ghost Recon Frontline, a new free-to-play battle royale game which burnt to the ground instantly. Like to dislike ratios on YouTube videos are rarely something that you would judge a game on, but the Ghost Recon Frontline reveal trailer has a less than 20% like ratio, which is truly awful. And you've only got to go onto Twitter and just put in Ghost Recon Frontline to see the amount of people that were truly horrified by this reveal. I mean, I've made a couple of videos in my time that were absolutely not popular, and even those videos didn't get close to this kind of like to dislike disparity. I don't even think Fallout 76 was this heavily downvoted, because at least that game, whilst utterly broken, was a Fallout game. Frontline is the epitome of what Ubisoft have to offer these days. And this wasn't just a community response either. Many gamers like myself, who've always had an interest in the Ghost Recon franchise, really I've just been waiting for Ubisoft to release a great game, were really disappointed with this reveal. In fact, most people who saw this reveal knew this was a bad idea. Just a week later, and the closed beta for Frontline has been cancelled indefinitely, and that says a lot about what this game has to offer and what the community thinks about it. But this is what Ubisoft have become. They've decided that they want to move into this free-to-play model with their games going forward, even with games like Ghost Recon, which have traditionally been tactical third-person shooter games. So, forgive me for being pessimistic here, but with their recent track record and trend to the free-to-play model, what's stopping them from doing the same here with this new Splinter Cell game? Before we get into this next part, I just want to preface this by saying that I don't think they're going to go with a free-to-play model on the Splinter Cell game. I'll explain my reasons as to why. I do think they'll stick to the traditional genre of this game, which is kind of a stealth shooter. But with that said, let's just move on with this part here. Now, I've never really played a Splinter Cell game before. The last Splinter Cell game to release was back in 2013, titled Blacklist. Actually, the footage for this video is from that game. The first game released back in 2002. Now, I would have been 13 years old when the first game came out, and back then, I didn't play stealth shooter games at all. Back then I was playing GTA Vice City and I believe Super Mario Sunshine. Now nearly 20 years later, my taste in games has changed, of course. Now I love looter shooter games, survival games and tactical shooter games. A new Splinter Cell game for me is exactly the sort of game that I'd want to play right now. But I am terrified Ubisoft are going to give it the free-to-play treatment, like so many of their titles, and ruin that experience. Now I did say I don't think they're going to do this, but I am worried about it for sure. And I cannot think of a more damaging event to Ubisoft as a studio or a publisher than a new Splinter Cell game reveal that's free-to-play, with a battle pass system, purchasable cosmetics, and all the monetization gimmicks that you can think of crammed into it. This would, I think, ruin them as a studio, as a publisher. I keep calling them a studio. I don't know if they are. I know they're a publisher. But this would ruin them, there's no doubt. I can't believe I'm saying this, but Ubisoft need to take a leaf out of EA's book. Now, before you hit that dislike button, I'm strictly talking about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Year after year, crowds of people were telling EA they need to release a third-person story-driven Star Wars game, but they refused, going as far to say that story-driven games were basically dead and no one really made them anymore. Eventually they listened and Jedi Fallen Order was released to overwhelming praise. For the 12 months ending October 2020, the game was the second highest grossing game in the US, beating out the likes of Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima. Ubisoft have to look at this example here and realise that a Splinter Cell game needs to be third person, it needs to be story driven, it needs to be a stealth shooter game and not a free to play battle royale experience. And you might think it's impossible for Ubisoft to make a battle royale experience out of Splinter Cell, but if you would have said to me 5 years ago that they were going to make a Ghost Recon game that was a battle royale experience that looked like Fortnite, I'd tell you that was impossible. So this is definitely not in the realms of impossibility. So I said before that I don't think Ubisoft will go down the free-to-play model with this Splinter Cell game. And here's why. Ubisoft absolutely need a big win. And if there's any game that could do, if there's any franchise that could give them that big win, that could give the consumer, us gamers, some trust back in them as a publisher, it would be a Splinter Cell game that was done properly and not done as a free-to-play model. As I said, I think if they went down the free-to-play model with Splinter Cell, I think it would ruin them as a publisher, and I cannot think of a scenario where they would get that trust back from us as gamers. And ultimately, if gamers don't trust you as a publisher, as a studio, then you really are in a bad place. And also, they already have games that are going that free-to-play model, so they pretty much satisfy that side of things. You've got the Division Heartland, the new Division PvP experience, that's going to be free-to-play. Ghost Recon Frontline, I'm pretty sure it will come. It will probably be a lot different than what they have already presented, and I'm sure it's going to be free to play as well. I wouldn't be surprised. I think Assassin's Creed is going to some kind of free to play model, possibly. I'm not 100% sure on that. Far Cry isn't free to play yet, and I would be surprised if they made that free to play. I think the model that they have with that works. I know Far Cry 6, a lot of people didn't like it, but I would say the majority of people did like it because it was just more Far Cry, and the people that play that game just want more Far Cry. So I think there's an audience there that will always be appeased by what they do with Far Cry. I cannot see that going free to play. So having a Splinter Cell game that was exactly as it was before, basically, with this stealth shooter game, I honestly think it would be a massive win for Ubisoft if they were to do it properly and they were to make it right. I don't anticipate hearing really any more news about this game for quite some time. If you were to believe the rumours, then it's been in development for maybe a couple of months. And so you're looking at least a 2 to 3 year window, if not longer. I'd probably want longer if they're going to make it perfect. Obviously, I don't think a 3 year window on most games is long enough these days. More like a 5 year window is better. So I'm not expecting to hear any more news about this game for some time. But let me know in the comments down below, guys, if you are excited for a new Splinter Cell game and what you would want the game to be. I'm pretty sure there'll be 1% out of people out there that want a free-to-play model, and that'll say a lot because the other 99% will not. As I said at the start, these reports are only rumours at this stage, but it makes sense that Ubisoft would go back to one of their big hitters like Splinter Cell to try and regain that community trust. The trust that pretty much isn't there for most people. Thanks very much for watching, and until the next one, Epic out.